Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1077 just came out, and there are a lot of points of interest coming out of this chapter. Biggest thing that I enjoyed from this chapter was that it feels like the tension is starting to ramp up in Egghead Island. I think out of all of the characters, across the board right now, Luffy and Zoro are the only ones that still seem relatively in good spirits and unbothered, and the tone is still kind of comical there. But even they are somewhat stressed out a little bit, or at least apprehensive of the Lunarians' abilities, and why they, even at their level of strength right now, can't easily deal with them. But aside from Luffy and Zoro, you can go down the line and basically the rest of the Straw Hats, Sanji being the one exclusion, but Nami, Frankie, Usopp, Brook, they are having legitimate trouble, and they are slowly sort of being taken out one by one, which is exciting. And then, of course, on the Vegapunk side of things, we've got the Shaka situation and the Stella body and the hypothetical of, could it actually be the Seraphim Doflamingo, as I've been talking about for a little bit. So we're going to get to all of that in a second. Let's start with Luffy and Zoro. Here's the big, really, really interesting thing with the Luffy-Zoro situation, which is we are about to find out whether Advanced Conqueror's Haki is basically, as strong as we think, and is basically the key to being able to damage anyone, no matter what level of defense they have in the One Piece verse, or if Lunarians are actually legitimately just even more broke than we initially thought, and they genuinely cannot be hurt, even by Advanced Conqueror's Haki, which is the strongest ability that we know of in the story. Now, here's the thing. Going back and looking at the King fight. With the King fight, Zoro never injures King while King has the flames on his back. However, there is an implication there that King would be able to be damaged by Zoro's new attacks with Advanced Conqueror's Haki, because Zoro, partway through the fight, mainly towards the very end, Zoro's attacking King. Zoro's just flexed his Advanced Armament, or Advanced Conqueror's Haki against King, by separating the swords, right? So King wasn't able to use his little sword trapping trick. And right after that, they're just having a clash of swords repeatedly. And Zoro's asking King, King has the flame on his back, so his defenses are technically up. Zoro's asking King, why are you blocking my attacks if your defenses are so strong? You can't tank them, right? Because you're afraid of what I can do now that I have Advanced Conqueror's Haki, right? And King doesn't accept that challenge. He doesn't try and allow Zoro to hit him like he did before, initially, to do the big explosion attack and everything like that. So King actually does not take that challenge, so it does seem like King is legitimately worried that Zoro can damage him with the Advanced Conqueror's Haki at this point, which is why King chooses to go back on the offensive and use his flames to do a big magma attack, which of course is overpowered by Zoro, etc, etc. Now, here's the thing. The King fight literally makes zero sense if Zoro would not have been able to hurt King with Advanced Conqueror's Haki. The simple reason being that, the flame on the back, that's defense. Taking the flame off allows you to have better offense, but there is no reason for King to switch from defense to offense if Zoro literally could not damage him while he had his defensives up. Why is that? Because Zoro's Haki was literally being drained. Zoro outright states to King that, hey, I don't have much time in this fight. He says this straight up as soon as he starts using Enma to its full potential. I don't have much time in this fight because I have to finish things up quickly. My Haki's being drained, so if I can't beat you soon, I basically die. I don't remember if he said he's gonna die, but he made it very clear that he's basically at the end of his rope. He's got very little Haki left. It's being drained rapidly, so he's got to finish things up quick. He says this outright to King. If Zoro's Advanced Conqueror's Haki could not damage King, then basically King had no reason at that point to switch, take the flame off his back, and basically go on the offensive just to allow Zoro to start being able to hurt him. So we can assume from their interaction towards the end of the fight, with Zoro asking King, why are you trying to block? Thought you could take any attack, right? You can take any attack, why are you trying to block? And King basically not rising to the challenge, still refusing to allow Zoro to hit him, even with the flame on his back, because Zoro now has Advanced Conqueror's Haki. So long way of saying, we should get a demonstration very soon that Advanced Conqueror's Haki can in fact hurt the Lunarians. Nothing else should be able to, most likely, but Advanced Conqueror's Haki, as implied by the Zoro versus King fight, should be able to hurt Lunarians because King was afraid of Zoro's Advanced Conqueror's Haki. Now, why Luffy and Zoro have not been using that so far, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. Using one Advanced Conqueror's Haki attack can't possibly be that draining to your stamina, right? Compared to what they've been putting out so far. You've got to assume that it is just Oda really holding those cards close to his chest. I assume that we could get a really good moment where, after all this trouble and everyone throwing their attacks at the Lunarians and everything like that, Luffy and Zoro do decide to get serious, use their Advanced Conqueror's Haki on them, are able to damage them, and that produces a very surprised and, I guess, shocked reaction from Lucci and Kaku. I think that would make for a great moment, but I wouldn't necessarily count on it. I think that we could also go the route of of it just never being addressed or shown. Maybe the fight gets interrupted or broken up without us ever getting to see it play out to its full conclusion and getting to see proof that yes, Advanced Conquerors Haki can hurt the Lunarians. Again, we kind of just have to assume it can, otherwise King fight makes no sense and it would make the Lunarians basically invincible. There's no characters in the series that can really consistently deal damage to them, right? It would also make King seem a lot stronger than we even expected in retrospect. So I don't know how this race got wiped out, but it's got ancient weapons or something like that. Whatever Im has cooked up in, Marie Joie or whatever that can race islands. I don't know, but the Lunarians are even more insane than we initially thought. So that's pretty crazy. I will also say that this transitions us pretty nicely to what's going on with the other Lunarians, and I think we talked about Luffy and Zoro, so I want to give some shout outs to Sanji right here, because the dude does not get, I guess, the glory that Luffy and Zoro do consistently. This felt like a very, very rare chapter, especially in One Piece nowadays, a very rare chapter where you had Luffy and Zoro kind of not looking the best earlier in the chapter, right? And then Sanji actually getting to look really cool and badass later on in the chapter when faced with a similar obstacle that Luffy and Zoro had to face, which is dealing with a Seraphim. Now, obviously, before people go crazy, Sanji probably did not hurt the Jinbei Seraphim, right? The same way Luffy and Zoro did not hurt their Seraphims, right? I'm just saying the feeling, right, that you're getting from the chapter is that you're starting the chapter being like, whoa, Luffy and Zoro, even with Lucci and Kaku, they did all that, they couldn't hurt the Seraphim. That's honestly kind of embarrassing for them. Then you're reading later on in the chapter, it's like, whoa, Sanji came in out of nowhere, looking really badass in basically anger rage mode, and he seems fully fired up and ready to take on a Seraphim solo by himself, right? It's just the feeling that you get. You feel like the chapter starts with Luffy and Zoro not being made to look too good, and then you feel like Sanji gets a cool moment later on. None of this is like actual power scaling. We know power scaling wise, if you want to get into that, yeah, Luffy and Zoro can also probably beat their Seraphim 1v1 or whatever. That's not a big deal. Like, it's not like Sanji's doing something that they can't, right? I'm just saying over the flow of the chapter, like the feel of the chapter, right? Not looking too good for Luffy and Zoro. Sanji gets a cool looking moment here, right? How these fights progress from here on out, anyone's guess, but I assume that they're all going to get the better of their respective Seraphims when all of this is said and done. Now, the interesting thing about Sanji, more than him just getting a nice moment, is the eyebrow flip, right? So we saw this during the Queen fight when Sanji was using his augmented abilities, his Germa abilities. I wasn't sure if we would ever see that again. I honestly didn't think about it. I thought that was a one-time thing to signify the initial activation of his Germa abilities, but from here on, he has access to them, but is simply never going to, transform in terms of personality or anything like that from there, right? So I just assumed that it was a passive ability that he has from now on. He's got his exoskeleton and everything like that, and we could just assume that Sanji from here on is as fast and strong and as difficult to damage as he was during the Queen fight. That was my assumption. I am pleasantly surprised to see that no, that is an actual mode that Sanji switches into. I think having it be a mode is just much better in terms of making it feel more... You always like when a character has like an on-off switch, right? When they go into try-hard mode, it just makes it feel less... I guess it makes you... it makes readers, I guess, downplay their base form feats less, if that makes sense. Like, I remember there was some level of discussion of when Sanji earlier in this arc kicked the same Jinbei Seraphim, right? This was a team effort this time, right? And I assumed at that time that, yeah, this is Sanji with all of his Germa power-ups and everything like that. This is the same Sanji that beat Queen. But now we can kind of go back and know that, no, that was just base Sanji or whatever. Let's see what he's going to do to this Jinbei Seraphim now that he's actually in tryhard mode and has actually, flipped the switch to use the full extent of his abilities, because that's a different scenario. That's a different person. That's a different caliber of fighter, right? So I generally just prefer when characters have a base level where they're just not as tryhard, and that means that you don't have to read too much into every little interaction that they have, I suppose. And there's a mode where you know that they're going serious, where you know that they're fighting to the full capacity that they're capable of, right? So I like that, just for the sake of making Sanji look better in the series and for just being more exciting and hyped to have a try-hard switch that you can flip on, the same way that we know that Luffy and Zoro are not using Advanced Conquerors Haki at the moment. Side note, I hope they're not using Advanced Conquerors Haki at the moment. There is a 5% chance, because Oda is sometimes ambiguous with Haki, that they've just been using it this entire time and we just have no visual cue for it. I don't know why. That chance does unfortunately exist. We just have to acknowledge it. But Interesting stuff from the Luffy-Zoro interaction. Cool stuff from Sanji and his interaction. I think Sanji again really needed that after being... The last thing I'll say is good for him is that he's been made to look like such a... He's been made to look fairly sad, I guess, over the course of Egghead Island, just with some of his quotes and behaviors and actions. So this is kind of the old badass, fired up Sanji that I'm used to seeing, I suppose. And just a reminder that he can look really cool and be really cool when, when push comes to shove. So that's good to see. In terms of the other Seraphims and the Straw Hat interactions, I do think that the Boa Hancock Seraphim is a very cleverly used character here. Reason being, Oda's trying to give the sense that characters are being offed, right? He's doing his best to, without really going the full route of murdering off major characters, he's trying to give the sense that this is, it's a murder mystery setup, as I've been saying throughout this arc so far, and that means that you need some level of casualties or characters being taken out. Tricky thing is, again, it's One Piece, so he's not going to do that. He's not going to kill some Strides, he's not going to kill Bonnie. He can't kill the main Vegapunk body, I don't think, but that's why we've got a few things to work with, which is one, we've got all these Vegapunk clones, satellite bodies, which we're towing the line as to whether or not Oda will actually kill those characters off or not, and how much that means killing off an actual person versus just killing off a percentage of a person's brain. Technically they're all a percentage of the main Vegapunk's consciousness, right? But then at the same time, with the Straw Hats, right, he's never going to kill a Straw Hat, Oda's never going to kill off a Straw Hat, right, or at least not this arc, but you can turn them to stone. Hancock's a very useful character in that sense, in that her hitting the Straw Hat, her hitting Frankie, her turning Usopp to stone, these are in a sense kind of taking Straw Hats out of the equation. They essentially got not murdered, but for the sake of the context of this island, right, they fell victim to the Seraphims, or, essentially basically the uprising that's taking place on the island, right? So it adds to that sense of stakes a little bit, it adds to the sense of tension a little bit. They are momentarily murdered, I guess you could say. So the Hancock Seraphim, I think, comes in great use there, right? You couldn't exactly throw the Mihawk Seraphim at Usopp because the Mihawk Seraphim would behead Usopp, but you can have Usopp turned to stone, and it feels like the Straw Hats are being ticked off one by one. I'm interested to see how far this goes. Are we going to get to see more Seraphim bodies get killed, or more Straw Hats turned to stone? I think those are kind of the two ways that we can kind of do it here, I guess, to create a sense of stakes or people getting knocked off one by one. So I'm excited that Oda has, even without, actually going to the realm of killing off major characters, he is finding ways to make this arc feel like there is serious threats that are on the loose, and if they don't get to the bottom of this mystery, there's going to be a problem for them, right? And that leads us to the Vegapunk situation at the end of the arc. Look, I don't think we got any new clues from here, unless Shaka is doing this as an elaborate trick or hoax, but I think Shaka's been crossed off of most people's suspect lists for a while now. I thought he was a good guess because a lot of people came up with that, and he seemed like a good guess initially. I think past a certain point, it didn't make sense. I'm still riding on hopefully it's the Doflamingo Seraphim, because to me, that's just such a very interesting idea. I think that would be particularly, I think that could open up a lot of new elements for the arc, especially if the Seraphim are all working together with him, or if they are under his command in some way or something like that, and he was able to find a way to get control. I do think that the idea that, because some people were saying this, because Vegapunk asked who is the person with Shaka, right? Because Vegapunk asked that means that it can't be the Doflamingo Seraphim, because Vegapunk would have recognized him. I don't think that necessarily holds up, because it's entirely possible that this figure is just shrouded in shadow. It can be a little dark, so Vegapunk couldn't actually see who was with Shaka. I like to think it would be a character that Vegapunk would ultimately recognize, because it makes it more interesting if it's not just some random person who just showed up on the island, say like a Lafitte or something like that, like some people are throwing out. So the last option is, of course, and we've discussed this before, Punk Records having taken control itself and basically manipulating some of the satellite bodies to act against the other satellite bodies. Don't know. But a lot of interesting stuff going on right now at Egghead Island. I do think the tension's ramping up. Hopefully we get a chance to see Advanced Conquerors Haki in use in the next couple chapters, and maybe Sanji going all out in a fight, since the Queen incident. So beyond that, hope you all have a good week, and I'll talk to you all later.